Noon. It is 4:01, so we are past our regular meeting start time. It's Tuesday, February 18th, 2020. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Here.
Commissioner Greeno?
Here.
Chair Inscore.
I'm here. Joe, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready and begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This time we will open up for public comment. Any member of the public can address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter that is on or off our agenda, realizing that you will again have an opportunity to comment publicly when we come to that item on the agenda. Do we have any general public comment this afternoon? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll move on. We do have one ceremonial item. This was something that was begun last year as a way of honoring those who serve as chair during this year of solid waste, and Lori Cowan served as chair this last year. I do not remember, did we read all this last year? We did?
Up to you.
What's up to me? I'm good. Okay. Well, we do appreciate those who serve, and certainly appreciate Lori during that time. If nothing else, as we look at this proclamation, it is a reminder of the things that we all did together over this last year, and I think that we have seen continued progress in all things solid waste over the last several years. So I appreciate your leadership this last year, and look forward to what's ahead for all of us. A lot of great things on the horizon. We'll move on into.
I think you would want a motion.
Oh, it's an actual resolution. Okay, I need a motion to approve resolution 2020-01.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
All right, very good. Open session items, consent agenda. We have the regular minutes from the 21st of January and a budget transfer in the amount of $6,009.
Move to approve on consent agendas 2.1 and 2.2.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Any public comment on these items? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll bring it back for a vote. Would you please poll the commission?
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
Yes. Very good. We'll move on into treasury reports under item number 3, and we will begin with our director's report and then move out from there. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Chair Inscore. So summarizing some of the things that have happened during the last month that aren't otherwise appearing on the agenda. On the 27th of January, staff met with Heidi Kunstall to discuss various options for limiting vehicular trespass at the landfill property, and attached to the director's report is a report from DDR looking at different types of traffic barriers we'll be considering for the landfill property. There's an attached letter approving our 5-year permit review for the Del Norte County Transfer Station. And on January 30th, Supervisor Howard and myself made a presentation to the Talawadene Tribal Council and discussed potential sites for a northern transfer station. On the whole, it was generally a positive meeting, and the authority and Talawadene staff will work together and coordinate efforts as the project moves forward. Continuing on, other things that are not otherwise appearing in the agenda, we do have a grant agreement that's been signed with the California Product Stewardship Council, and I was pleased to find that we now have 2 locations where there are drug take-back programs, and there's a press release that attached to that, but CVS and Walgreens will take back your prescription medicines. And it's a sealed program, so it's a double lock system. So once you deposit something in there, no one has access to that at all until the person comes for the collections. So your information will be secure and the materials will be properly managed. So I'm very, very excited about CVS and Walgreens offering that community service, well ahead of the legislative deadline that will require them to offer it. So thanks to them for stepping up. On the 21st of January, I discussed with Allison Tans the updated website for the North Coast Recycling Market Development Zone. This is a program that Del Norte has partnered with Humboldt County in for several years, and it essentially makes low-interest loans and technical assistance available to businesses that are interested in using recycled feedstock. So we haven't had a lot of industrial activity on that front, but the North Coast Recycling Market Development Zone continues to exist, and you might want to check out their website, as it does talk about some of the programs that are available. We continued on with the Rethinking Recycling radio program, and on the 4th of February, we met with Paige Swan, who's the principal of Crescent Elk Middle School, and this meeting was put together by Randy Scott and attended by Jeremy Herber of Recology. And the purpose was to discuss ways that Crescent Elk could expand the amount of materials that they are collecting for recycling and to increase the recycling of beverage containers at the school. So there's an attached instruction sheet and signage. On the 11th of February, I spoke with Doug Svensson of Applied Development Economics, who's putting together the comprehensive economic development strategy for Del Norte County. And we provided an overview of how solid waste management works here and the opportunities for recycling market development, including the recycling market development zone. Attached to this report is a reminder that all commissioners and Kira and myself and our legal counsel all have to submit Form 700 forms as part of our disclosure under the Fair Political Practices Act. And I think that summarizes the director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Ward? All right, let's move on to financials then.
Moving on. Financials, we have $1,119,000 and some change in the bank, plus the last month's rent. So our cash flow is looking fine. Again, looking at our accounts receivables, most of the accounts that have any significant balance over 90 days are all on hold or in collections, reflecting the good work that Kathy Brewer and Haley Smith are doing. And then under claims approved by director, once again, our largest payment went to Hambro WSG for the good services they provided at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. And additional funds, the second biggest line item was going to the interfund cost plan to pay the county for the auditing and financial services they provide, as well as the IT and the broadcasting of the meetings. Moving on to the monthly cash and charge reports, looking at our monthly income, while we are receiving income at a slower pace than we did last year, we are still ahead of budget. So our finances are generally looking good. And that just reflects conservative budgeting. As we talked about before, as we were looking at the budget, I did scale back this year's budget because that was where the trend was going. So certainly we're seeing that play out. So as an example of that, you just look at January under authority service fees, and you can see in January we received $94,916. The previous January we received $98,331, so that's a difference of $3,400, but we're $8,700 ahead of budget. So long as the money comes in and it fills out the budget, then we're good in terms of spending. So on the whole, we are $128,159 ahead of budget at this point, midway through the year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions regarding financials? All right, very good. Back here. Okay, then we'll move on. We don't have anything regarding the landfill post-closure. We do have one item that was noted in your report, and then we'll focus in on it. 5.1, the discussion regarding the letter requesting the CPI adjustment.
Yes, this is a standard part of our contract. This is nothing new. It happens every year. And essentially the formal process is we receive a letter from our contractors asking that we implement the CPI adjustment in July, as we do every year, and then we go through the process of doing the math. So that's what this request is. We anticipate a similar request from Hambro WSG in the next few days.
Motion to approve the College of Del Norte request for an annual CPI adjustment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, bring it back to the board. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair Enscore?
Yes, very
Thank you.
good.
So with that act, I will start preparing the change orders once the final consumer price index for March is available, and we'll be looking at that as rate adjustments that would become effective in July.
Mr. Ward, and maybe I'm just missing it. I know it's in our agenda packet, but where on our agenda is discussion regarding the landfill security measures?
Well, we weren't
I note
discussing that as a separate item, but I did include that as part of the director's report. And then attached to the director's report was the report prepared by DDR
So
Consultants.
what, I guess my question then is, and I should have asked this before we moved on from your report, since you didn't necessarily highlight it.
Right.
What are we doing with that?
That's an excellent question. We have not yet laid out exactly what barriers are going to be placed where, and that will impact both costs and permitting. And so I wouldn't do that without involving the board in that discussion. And I haven't decided yet exactly which barriers to place where, and then working through the county about what additional permitting there might be associated with that. So I've had general discussions, but specifically this kind of barrier in this location, we're not quite to that point yet.
Maybe you've discussed it with Heidi.
We've discussed it generally
Already
with Heidi,
yeah.
we've discussed it with Dominic, we've gone out there and we've walked the site, we've talked about what would work in each location, the ups and downsides in terms of cost and monitoring.
My request would be that now that we have this report from DDR, that regardless of where you are maybe in the process, that at our next meeting, it's actually placed on the agenda so that if any of us actually have some input as to what we would like to see, that it's properly agendized and we can weigh in on that. Because right now we have a lot of information, but it does not appear that we really have an agenda place to discuss and give direction to. So if you wouldn't mind placing that on the agenda, if we don't have anything, then so be it. But if we do, I have some thoughts that I'd like to weigh in on. these
Absolutely, I'll
barriers.
do that.
So, okay, thank you. Sorry, I should have asked that before we moved on. Okay, we don't have anything under transfer station items 6. Under General Solid Waste Authority matters, 7.1 is our independent auditor's report.
Unfortunately, Treasurer Rich Taylor wasn't able to make the meeting. He had unexpected grandfather duties. However, as he described them, I have been through enough of these external audits to know that the crux of this is found on page 5 under opinions, and it says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material aspects the respective financial position of the proprietary fund of the authority as of June 30th, 2019, and the respective changes in financial position and cash flows thereof for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That's what's known as a clean opinion. There's nothing that they found that raised any sort of red flag or concerns. So even though this is required to be done biannually, every other year for JPA, tradition has been that we do this annually regardless. And so we've done that for every year I've been employed with the agency. And another part of this annual audit process is we are required to respond to their findings. And so at the end of the audit report, after page 34, you'll see the corrective action plan proposed by the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, and that's our response letter. And essentially, they repeated 2 of their regular findings. The first one is that we are not properly following GASB 68, which is General Accounting Standards Board ruling about how these things are processed. And bottom line is, because the county does our accounting, until they split out that information, we cannot comply with that obligation. So we are at a very similar level of compliance with all of the other county departments. The other finding that they make is regarding our deficit net position, meaning essentially, you looked at as a whole, are we in the black or are we in the red? And the answer is we're in the red. And the reason why we're in the red is we have the liability associated with the landfill and the construction of the transfer station. So those are the two big red marks, and we've been slowly digging ourselves out of that hole. And they keep coming back with the same recommendation, which is you should raise your rates because that way you'll dig yourselves out of the hole faster. And our response has always been, as you'll see it is here, this is a political decision. We are doing this under the guidance of the board, and the board makes these decisions, and we consider these things as we set the budget and as we set the rates. But what I've heard clearly from the board is that we value having the lowest rates in the region, and we like to keep it that way. And so that's what we've been doing. So that's the sort of verbal summary of it, but bottom line good news that I think is really should be highlighted in this audit is that compared to the prior fiscal year, the authority's net position went increased by $393.952. So we went from $889,467 in the hole to $495,515 in the hole, which is really good news because that means within the next 2 or 3 fiscal years, if these trends continue, we will be in the black, which would be a really lovely thing.
Well, let's hope the current law that just passed doesn't screw that all up for us.
So with that, the action that's required is to essentially accept and approve the draft corrective action plan as proposed by the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority and to receive and file the audit.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Okay, I just have just a comment, I guess, before we vote on this. I'm never in favor of seeing repeated findings. And I'm not sure what the reason is. I don't see a reason anywhere of why the county is not in compliance with GASB 68. I think it would be helpful to this board for there to be a brief summary from the county auditor, just to simply say, this is where we are, this is what we're doing, because this is 2 years of findings that go on our audit, and if there is a reason, then I think that reason also should be included within our corrective action plan, because our corrective action plan, as it relates to GASB 68, basically says, well, the county hasn't done it yet. And we stand alone as a JPA where we have our own responsibilities to answer to these things. And I just think that some clarity would be helpful from my vantage point. I'm sure that there are reasons of why that is the way it is. And I would also like to know, since part of the corrective action plan implies that the way that this will be fixed going forward is for the employees that work for the Solid Waste Management Authority will be moved out of the bigger pool of county employees, what that process looks like. Is it, because if it's not, there's no point in having it in an action plan if that can't happen. I mean, if the county auditor says, yes, that's a great idea, but we can't do that, then we need to know that, if that, or take it out of the action plan. So I would just like some clarity on this, since we've done this 2 years running now, of what is it that we need to do, if anything, and just so that there is clarity on what's actually happening. I think it would just be good to have in our files.
Thank you. I appreciate that direction.
All righty, thank you.
But we gave that direction last year. Similar. We had this discussion last year. Did we find anything
did.
out last year?
You did, and that's how we got the in the middle paragraph in that response. That's
all you got?
That's what we got.
Okay.
Okay,
I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
thanks.
Gray hair is amazing.
What's that?
Gray hair is amazing.
You'll get some soon, Mr. Green.
I have a few.
All right. Anything else from the commission? Thank you. All right, would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair and score?
Yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Ward, for taking us through the independent audit. Moving on, under item number 7.2, discussion and possible action regarding Hambro Recycling's application to provide a pilot project for recycling collections in the outlying areas of our county.
This is a verbal description that I've received from Hambro summarizing what are the main points of an application they intend on submitting to Cal Recycle. As part of that application, Cal Recycle will be looking to have us complete some of that application. Essentially, if the board doesn't support this, then that would be that. But if this is something that the board would like to see happen, then by expressing support, that increases the likelihood it will happen. This falls from a law that was passed in 2017, SB 458, and this was passed at the time of the China Sword, trying to figure out some sort of different way to approach buyback recycling because they were seeing a lot of the buyback recycling centers close. So they said, well, why don't you do pilot programs in some of these areas? Why don't you do periodic collections where you don't necessarily have to have the bricks and mortar kind of storefront to do buybacks, but you have temporary ones. And so it was kind of a nebulous concept, but included in that law was always a focus that there should be some rural pilot. And so in some ways, this is the low-hanging fruit for our agency. If we want to see pilot programs where we have collections of recyclables and redemption opportunities in Gasky and Smith River and Klamath, this is the moment. And so that's essentially what Hambros is proposing to do. The grant would support the equipment and staff necessary to provide those 1 day a week collection and redemption services in those 3 communities. And the description's all here, and Hambros representatives are here in the audience if you have any further questions. But essentially the action would be to support the preparation and submittal of a grant application based on the concepts as described.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Ward?
I have some for Hambros. One.
Somebody, one of you,
Thanks.
get to weigh in for us, or maybe answer Mr. Tompkins' question.
So you're submitting this, I assume that means you really feel this has a pretty good chance of having some success?
Yeah, yes.
All right.
We actually, we share the concern of the whole state on the crisis of CRV, and we think if we can do better here, we have more of a chance of staying in business, doing CRV. And so we want to reach out. We think we can provide service to people who can't come to Crescent City for whatever reason, no vehicle, no time, no whatever. So that's why we reached out. We want to do this. We want to do the schools and,
Great.
hope to impact, in a positive way, the CRV recycling in Crescent City.
So I ran your plan by a very smart person that I happen to be married to, and she said, well, wait a minute, one of those pickup times is on a weekday, the one in Smith River. She said, and that's working time. They're not open during after work. And so she suggested that day be the hours be moved down, so where, for instance, from 11 to 7 instead of, completely during. She thought that might give you a little better chance of getting more people.
So we feel like the days and hours are flexible. Of course, in the wintertime, it's dark at 5. I don't know that I want a guy out in the dark with a cash box.
Yeah.
But we're planning to do that. One of the plans was to, on Saturday and Sunday, be at the Gasky transfer station, and then the other day Klamath. So we're there along with their attendant, who's handling trash. We got double, 2 guys there, security for each other. So we are definitely flexible on what days we could do it. And that's a good point. And one of the rules that we have to follow is 8 hours during the week and 8 hours on the weekend. So we're just trying to tailor all that, and it's all, it can all be adjusted to fit the needs of the public, so.
Good.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Any public comment?
No, I just wanted to thank Hambro. This sounds like a great opportunity to increase the efficiency of recycling in the county. So thank you for taking that step.
Okay? Very good.
Oh,
So,
I think-
yeah, Mr. Slagle.
At this time, I did want to mention, we're passing out some cards at the recycling center the last several weeks. We received notice after we delivered our last load that our price would be cut an additional 20% on aluminum. When we started, it was 85 cents a pound for our aluminum, and it's then dropped. The last load we delivered was 41 cents a pound. Significant decrease. 2 days after we delivered that load, we were called by the processor and said it's dropping as of now to 27 cents. So it's getting tougher. We're looking at opportunities to spread these costs, the costs that we have over a bigger area, and that's why we need to go to the schools, go to the outlying areas. But if our processor goes down in Reading, then additional costs, then we'll have to deliver to Sacramento. The point is, everybody knows recycling is, in the tank right now, and we're doing what we can to get around it. Our little cards we're passing out suggest that you call your state assemblyman. We've been working with, I don't know how working with Cal Recycle is the right word, but we've been in contact with Cal Recycle. And they said there's nothing we can do about it. It's a legislative issue. So what they've done is they provided a formula in order to make it doable to run these recycling centers. It costs money to recycle. And so in this formula, they're adjusting the process and handling fees in order to keep us at this 15% profitability ratio. But they adjust that rate, I think it's every 2 years. So here we are, 2 years into it. We're down from 85 to 27 cents. Maybe it's time we adjust the rates. So it has to go through the legislature. So we're passing out a little card that says, call your legislator, let us know. Randy, what was it? $350 million reserve is being held by Cal Recycle to adjust these rates. Well, you can pass. We'll take some of it any time, and it's hurting all over. I think 300 centers have closed this year. It's tough in these small outlying areas. The ones are doing okay in Southern California where you have a large population, but when we're in a rural area with a small population, it's tough. Just wanted you to know that as we go on with the rest of these.
Thank you.
Yeah, real quick, I know that market is volatile, but it sounds like there's been a long-term downward trend, right? Several years.
Right,
Right.
and you're seeing it in
Starting with-
plastic as well. The world now has ships loaded with plastic with nowhere to go.
Right.
Plastic's down from, I think it was originally 11 cents, it's down to 3 cents. So, tough all over. We like being in this business. We're maintaining our profitability by spreading these costs out. So we're looking for avenues to continue to spread. Bring your bottles and cans, Elk Valley Road.
All right. Thank you. And we certainly do appreciate Hambro thinking outside the box, trying to find solutions here local. You'd be commended for that. None of this has been easy for anybody here. And it just speaks, I think, to the continued responsibility that we have from an advocacy standpoint, that we need to collectively, as the authority, along with our other partners, especially in rural counties, continue to push for some legislative fixes on some of these issues. Because we're never going to have the volume that the metropolitan areas have that can compensate for these kind of fluctuations. And so, but for the public, if you're holding on to those cans, or if you're just throwing them away because you're not motivated to go, I almost said what I shouldn't have said. If you're not motivated to take them and recycle them responsibly for money, you're actually making the problem worse for all of us. So be a good recycler and take out those CRVs in and turn them in.
I think the word you were looking for is too privileged.
Sure, we'll go with that, Mr. Tompkins. That would have been a lot better than what I would have said, probably. So, okay, so you're looking for a consensus support of Hambro submitting this grant application?
Based on these concepts with any additional input that you have. I
There is-
heard the comments regarding ours, and we'll look at that as we submit the application.
There's absolute consensus across the dais for that grant, and we appreciate you guys going forward with that. Come up here so that we can all, some of us don't hear as well as we used to.
I've met with Tollaway, Danny, Tim Hoon, and we've been granted permission to go out there. We just got to work out a use agreement there. So
Good.
when we do that, we can work out the hours and times, and it may, maybe Smith River is so good that we go there twice a week, so we can hit the weekend
Awesome.
in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Building partnerships, like it. Okay, we're going to move on then to item 7.3, Mr. Ward, regarding the possible developing of legislation in regards to 1383.
So this is the organics short-term climate pollutants issue that we've been discussing the last few meetings. Bottom line is things are moving, and we are in a position to advocate to our legislators that we establish a bill and start moving it through the process. What you see before you under the ESJPA legislative proposal 7.3.2 is the concept about what we think could work in a rural area. Essentially, here are some of the big pieces. One, upon request by a jurisdiction, the department has the ability to waiver food collection requirements based on bear populations, because previously they said above 4,000 feet, we have bears at sea level, it's an issue. Other things under item A2, there would be a deferral for many of these requirements, specifically on the collections, until 2035. So that would be kicking it down the road quite a bit. But in the process of having that extra time, there would be several things that we would have to do. That would include the establishment of an edible food recovery task force to recover 20% of edible food by 2025. So we'd be building on the good work that's being done by the Food Council there. We would also have to do two of the following: either establish a collaboration for food recovery for animals, backyard or community composting, or a regional collaboration. And then finally, we would have to indicate if we wanted to pursue these options, we would have to notify the department of that by 2022. So that's kind of an overview of some of the requirements. Bottom line is we would still have to do a lot of the things that are being called for in SB 1383, but we would be stepping back from a number of the collection requirements. That's only if this bill passes through the legislature and is signed by the governor. So we got a long road ahead, but because of the actions that the board has already given and the direction the board's already given, I've been able to work with the ESJPA staff to help craft these ideas, and we're well positioned to move this forward if the board continues that direction.
Yeah, this is, from my perspective, seeing how far they are. When we were a month ago, we were talking about starting to have some conversations and getting kind of up to speed about what's happening. I was blown away when I saw how far along we are, and that we actually have something that is in a format that can be placed as potential legislation. And so, and going back to the suggestion of your connection with ESJPA, obviously when we see all of that and how important that has become with this one issue, that's huge, having you being a part of that and keeping us part of the loop so that we can advocate. This is as bad as 1383 feels for us as a rural county. This feels really good that we have at least a reasonable response to how we can approach these important issues in a responsible manner. So, good work. Thank you. Appreciate it. Other input for Mr. Ward? Yes, Mr. Howard.
Yeah, quick question. And this might be taking a step backwards. I'm wondering if you ever dove into why some Northern California communities were exempted from this legislation to begin with. So Oric, Garberville, Ferndale, why they were removed from having to comply with this legislation and implementation of it, why an exemption was given.
I'm not aware of such exemptions.
Okay.
Yeah,
Due to
I-
population?
Well, it could be the same thing like we have, which is a rural deferral. The deadlines aren't coming as imminently as they are for the urban areas, but it's not an exemption. It's a deferral.
so I've been told that they wouldn't have to comply with
I-
the law as it stands. So if you could take
That,
a look
that is, I'd be happy to
at
look into that.
because they were named in the legislation.
Okay, I'd be happy to
Well,
look
there's
into that.
200 plus pages of stuff there, and I know a lot could be missed.
Okay, you said Oric, do you have the other?
Oric, Garberville,
Ferndale.
and Ferndale. And then CSAC is also diving into this one extensively this year too. Having the ESJPA take this kind of point on it and your participation. I just want to say this is an excellent and outstanding start, and it's the entire reason why we've wanted you down there in the first place. So really appreciate your participation in it.
Very good.
Great. So the action we're looking for is if there's any feedback you have on the legislative proposal, I'd be happy to forward that to our partners. And then direct staff to continue to work with the SJPA staff as well as other affiliated organizations and colleagues to advocate as necessary to find an author for this legislation this year and to authorize the chair to sign support letters as needed while this bill moves through the legislature and committee review process.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Any public comment? One of the things that I would suggest, Mr. Ward, and suggest to our partners on the JPA is that when this gets to a format where they're going to make an appeal, whether that is to Assemblymember Wood or whoever, when we get to that point in time, that the city and the county are ready to advocate for this at the same time, so that the Solid Waste Management Authority is sending that, the city, the county is sending that we look for letters addressing this issue from our partners at Recology and Hambro, and that we collectively send a unified message about just how difficult SB 1383 is going to be to apply to our community. So
Yeah, no,
I'd be
I-
happy to do that. We've already started meetings with the city and the county staff
Yeah.
regarding the SB 1383 requirements, but from their perspective, largely it is, okay, you're supposed to do this, tell us what we have to do, and make it easy, which is totally understandable.
there is no make it easy with
There is
this.
no make it easy, and we can't do it all, is the short of it. And it's news they don't want to hear, and that's understandable. So we're working together to try to navigate the most efficient way to address these requirements.
And have you spoken with Assemblyman Wood or Senator McGuire yet about any of this? I know you and I have had these conversations over the last couple months.
The short answer is no, but that's because I was deferring to our ESJPA colleagues who were making the strategic calls about who they thought would be the best author to work
Okay.
this through the system. And they think Assemblymember Wood might be an excellent one, but I was waiting until we actually had all these pieces together, and I had a chance to talk with you once again and make sure that you're all on board with this, and which is what I'm hearing.
Okay, very good, good work. Okay, we have a motion to move forward with this. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Tompkins? Yes. Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno? Yes. Commissioner Howard? Yes. Chair Enscore?
Yes. All right, 7.4, I asked to put this on, possible action regarding support letters regarding SB 54 and AB 1080, which are parallel bills that are currently in the legislature. Mr. Ward, if you want to
I'd be happy to.
summarize this.
In short, California has a 75% recycling goal, right? So that means that on average, all of the materials in our material economy get recycled at a 75% level or higher. That's how we meet that goal. And so if there's parts of our material economy that have a 0% recycling rate, that's dragging us all down and requiring that all of the other things that get recycled at an even higher rate. So single-use plastics are an example of this problem, which is they're used in packaging, they're used in all sorts of applications, and their recycling rate is typically for plastics other than number 1 and number 2, is very low, to the point that it's not really believable that they'll get to a 75% recycling rate for these other plastics. For polyvinyl chloride, for polypropylene, I don't see the trajectory by which they can get there. And so it begs the question, should we continue to allow these materials to be used for single-use packaging? Because that conflicts with the idea of having a 75% recycling goal. So these are 2-year bills. There's a parallel, they're parallel each other, and essentially what they do is they say, Cal Recycle, help us solve this problem, identify the most problematic packaging materials and set priorities, and they're essentially making Cal Recycle responsible for this. While I understand there might be some hesitation in giving Cal Recycle those kinds of responsibilities, given our current experience with SB 1383, I also think that it is the right thing to do something, because to do nothing is what we have had, and you see the result. Unfortunately, the plastic that we see on the beach, that we see in the ocean, this is a problem of our lifetimes. When we were born, it wasn't there, right? So you got to ask yourself, are you doing something to address this? Or is this our legacy? So I think we should do something.
And AB 1080, both of them? They're parallel.
I didn't write the letter for Alan, but it would be similar.
Okay. Thank you. You have a second? All right, any other discussion?
I just disagree with the premise. I just don't think it's wise for Cal Recycle to get involved in our economy even more than they already do. More regulation isn't the way to go. Deregulating maybe how we get rid of garbage, how we get rid of recycling. I think that's probably the way to go. Make it even more profitable to produce technologies to fix our problems instead of just banning the use of materials. I disagree with this.
Others? Well, I guess,
I think this is a symptom of mismanagement on California's part and our regulations, inefficient regulations. I disagree.
well, the reality is putting things into inexpensive plastic containers adds to someone's profit margin, and yet those people who are producing these have no responsibility for their disposal. That's my concern. I'm not necessarily thrilled with the idea that Cal Recycle is going to try to manage this, but what Cal Recycle is being asked to do with SB 54 and AB 1080, as I understand it, is to come up with a plan to address how do we confront the fact that there are millions and millions and millions of pieces of this being produced by manufacturers, purchased by businesses, and those manufacturers nor the businesses have any responsibility to what happens to those once they're in the hands of a consumer. So by continuing to pass this on as a free market issue that we don't want to tell anybody how to do business, the reality is then we're going to put it on the consumer, because that's the only person that we really have control over. So then what do if we can't manage the waste stream and these things, and they can't be recycled, then ultimately the person who pays for this is going to be the consumer, who's going to pay higher rates to dispose these items that maybe shouldn't be in the stream in the first place. So if we don't address where the problem begins, then how are we ever going to come to a solution? That's my.
Shouldn't it be the consumer's responsibility in the first place? Shouldn't the consumer look at what they're buying and make that judgment on their own? I mean, if these companies are doing such terrible things that they're putting their products in these terrible, plastic containers, why wouldn't the consumer just decide? why does the government have to step in and tell the consumer, tell these companies how to run their business? I disagree.
So, so I guess my.
I don't think the premise is correct.
So then, if a company is producing something that is having a materially bad impact on our community, you're fine with that? They have a right to do business even if it affects our environment here in our community? So I disagree that the premise is wrong. I understand that business is business and people should have the right to do business, but if their right to do business has a material effect on my right to live in an environment that's not polluted by what they're producing, then whose rights take precedence in that case?
They're not the ones polluting. It's the choices of the people who are using their products.
So should we advocate that our people in our community?
I'm advocating for better waste management, better disposal of these containers.
But if they can't be recycled, then these containers have no place to go other than into the landfill.
Not necessarily. If California would loosen their requirements on what you could do with these materials, then we could get rid of them. We could put them in incinerators. We could put them in trash to energy type systems, and it could be disposed of.
And I don't disagree that those are all theoretical.
There's all sorts of other ways of taking care of these things too.
The reality is, though, Mr. Greenow, and I appreciate your point on this. The reality is it's not just a California issue. If you look at those who are trying to deal with this issue across the United States, they're facing the same challenges. Even in places where the regulations are much less, we're still facing these same challenges. And that's what concerns me, is that if there was a model that was showing effective reduction of these things and taking them out of the waste stream, or increasing recycling someplace else in the United States that is reasonable, then I think I would be on board with you. But without seeing those models, then it does concern me that we're going to just continue down this road with producing items that are going to continue to end up either as litter or in the waste stream. That's what it appears that we're stuck with. And while I agree that California has far too much regulation, I don't think anybody would argue that fact, but we live here. So we have to operate underneath the law that exists here. And how do we be good stewards within the context that we live? So,
We could change the law.
and that is part of what we're doing with SB 1383, and my hope is that Cal Recycle is going to address some of these very issues, and that there will be advocacy positions that we can take based on the research that's done coming out of SB 54 and AB 1080 that says this is a strategy, and one of those strategies may be change in regulation.
If I may.
Sure.
Commissioner Greeno has a really good point on the one hand. On the other hand, we have an industry who's able to affect buyers' decisions subconsciously through advertising. They do it regularly, they do it constantly, and they do it to their advantage. And if I believed consumers could make, and I'm talking about generally, could make good informed decisions, and we could, through educational programs like what the staff is doing in our schools, if we could overcome that kind of brainwashing, which is essentially what they do, if we could overcome that in the general public, I would go for what you're saying. We are responsible for what we buy, but we don't make good decisions because we are brainwashed, generally. And so I think that affects the validity of that argument.
You're saying that the public is unable to make wise decisions
generally. Yes,
Well, that has been proven in our area.
Distrust our electorate.
not the electorate, sir.
That's basically what you're saying by
No,
saying that.
you're using the term electorate, I did not use that.
Well,
These
I
are the same
said
people that elect-
consumer.
No, okay, but think about our recycling, what we've been trying to do. I've sat on this board for 3 years, and our recycling was contaminated 30%. Are we maybe down to 20, 28, 25, 28? And think about how much, this is just look at our, don't look at everybody, just look at our community. We can't even get our own community to recycle properly. I get what you're saying, Jason. I think we're regulated up the yin-yang here. But, yeah, how do you get that? I mean, I, as a business person, made the conscious choice to change how I was using single-use plastic, you know, to make it, you know, something there where it wasn't. You know, we had to make that choice because people don't recycle. We would like them to. You probably, I bet you all of us up here do. But we have seen, I have seen over the last 3 years, just in our community, they don't. We have the problem we do here because they don't. Then all of us, that small percentage that does, it gets thrown in the trash. Our recycling isn't even recycled because it's contaminated. So, and that's just our county. So I hear what you're saying, and I wish we could change everybody, but we have been trying to educate, we have done seminars, we have done group, but all these different things that we've done, and it hasn't even helped the 27,000 here, let alone all of California. So I get where you're going, but we all have to make a conscious choice to do other things because the masses aren't doing what's right in our county. That's all I can look at is our numbers that we have dealt with. I don't know what's going on in LA County or Humboldt County. I just know in Del Norte County, we can't even get them to do it, and I'm not sure why.
And that's working within the system that we have now. That's not considering what it could be. That's not considering what it could be if we slashed some regulations, made it profitable for companies to put that investment into technology and come up with a better solution.
well, and I guess that
Instead of giving sweeping powers to a regulatory agency that has already shown it's not efficient. It doesn't have the ability to do this effectively.
Well, I guess my take on this is still, we can make this a philosophical debate, or we can talk about the problem that exists today. And I don't think that, I'll just say from my vantage point, I don't think we disagree philosophically about this issue. What I think we disagree about is the fact that something needs to be done in a practical sense now, while we continue to talk about the future and what we might do to change fundamentally how the state of California is run. And that's obviously a it's a big undertaking, and I think we all know that. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that's something that's years in the process to try to change that systemic nature of where our California government and its entities are. At the same time, I think that there are things that need to be addressed right now. And so trying to find that balance is very difficult. Mr. Howard?
I need to ask Director Ward for some interpretation, since he's probably closer to this than most. Director Ward, in our first paragraph, the bill directs California Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery to adopt regulations before January 1st, 2024 that require producers, which include the people who manufacture single-use packaging or priority single-use products, to achieve a 75% reduction of waste generated. So let's take, for instance, the single-use water bottles, Alexander Dairy milk that comes in a single-use packaging. What does that then do for those consumers, those manufacturers of those consumer projects single-use? Do they now have to go out and find a new product?
Yeah, I think that's ultimately over, the 5-year horizon. That's what I would expect the companies would be looking at. Okay, now we have to make sure that we're packaging in recyclable materials. So what recyclable materials are there available that would work for our particular product?
So how are you defining, because you're saying recyclable materials right now, where you have recyclable materials, which are these single-use plastics that are just sitting on boats that used to
Oh.
be considered recyclable. So how's that being defined?
Well, that would be up to CalRecycle. At this point in time, number one and number two plastics are pretty definitely recyclable. Glass is recyclable. Aluminum is recyclable. The other plastics, number 3 through 7, are more questionable, and CalRecycle would be tasked with looking at that very closely.
So give us some illustrations of 1 and 2,
Please.
Mr. Ward.
Number 1 is a soda bottle, and number 2 is a milk jug.
So
You
that
know,
would
the
be with the
HDPE milk jug.
So
Also distilled waters.
water bottles, are they in?
Water bottles are typically in number 1 plastic, PET.
Okay.
And then the caps are oftentimes number 5s, which are also recyclable at this point in time.
So, and I think if this is where Mr. Howard was going with this, if a company's already producing their predominant product in a number 1, they're already at 75%.
That I would anticipate
Because
that they
what-
wouldn't have to change anything. There might,
Because if you took all the caps off of that, that probably doesn't represent more than 25% of their total stream.
right,
into
and
the-
number 5, the market's pretty good. Apart from rinsing a number 1 bottle and separating the bottle and the cap, I don't anticipate the recyclability. I think those would continue to be recyclable into the future.
So what changes with this legislation?
The folks who are in charge of making packages, right, would have to look a lot more carefully at the materials they're using to make those packages. This would affect Amazon, the folks who are manufacturing things that are prepackaged and sent out. Those would be increasingly in more recyclable materials, I would expect. I would also expect the materials that are not being recycled very well, say number 7, I would expect that would be phasing out, and that you would see less of that over time, and you would see different materials used to package those products.
What's an example of number 7?
Heinz ketchup bottle used to be a number 7. Essentially, number 7 is other plastics, which is a horrible category, but essentially, it's not 1 through 6. So
It's just asking the manufacturers to change their choices of materials as they're producing it for consumers like yourself, or businesses
it's
for
placing
yourself.
greater
Right.
demands. It would ultimately be placing greater demands on the producers of products to make sure that those products are produced and marketed in recyclable materials. And it tasks CalRecycle with identifying what are materials that are recyclable,
Right.
so that businesses could have clear guidance as to what materials they could choose from.
Can we expect, given the problems that CalRecycle would be trying to address, we can expect consumer costs to go up, correct? I mean, so along the line?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. However, it's important to recognize the overall dynamics of this, which is plastics are in our economy because we live in a petroleum-driven economy. When you refine crude oil, you generally produce fuels, which you can sell, and you boil it off, and it's a process called fractional distillation, and the different components have different boiling points. And so the thickest stuff, the asphalt bitumen, that's the black tarry stuff you use in road bases, and then you've got the lighter fraction, which is fuels that are easily sold, and in between you have all these intermediates, right? You've got solvents, you've got soaps, you've got lubricants, and they've got way more of that stuff than there are markets. And so what chemical engineers did in the 1960s, and this was response to our material economy, but basically they figured out that if you combined a fraction of the byproducts from the refining process with natural gas, that you could produce a variety of plastics. And these plastics largely are blended with plasticizers, which give them their different qualities, but those plasticizers tend to be endocrine disruptors. But the overall message here that I'm trying to give you is this. Plastics are a byproduct of a petroleum economy. As long as we have a petroleum economy, there will be more plastics that will be trying to find some way to go somewhere to be profitable. But that doesn't necessarily make them profitably recyclable. So this is part of our challenge, that we are certainly in a petroleum-driven economy now. Whether or not, how long we continue on that, as long as we continue on that, there will be more plastics that will be coming into our system. And some of those, as long as it's allowed, will be used for single-use packaging because there will be more plastics to market next year.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this as well as Mr. Grinow is. This is a philosophical piece that I know I offered my motion for it because I know something needs to be done. But the innovation that needs to take place in a short period of time to allow a producer of something to have packaging that would be more recyclable, for lack of a better term. 2024, is it? That's a tight window. For that very reason, I'm not entirely sure how we're going to achieve. God, this, yeah,
I believe they all have it already and are using it. It's already out there. It's just a choice.
have what though?
They have the single-use packaging and a recycling.
But they're
It's a
talking about a reduction of 75% of single-use packaging
guess I'm looking at
under
it
the
differently.
legislation.
So you have a manufacturer who chooses to use what we don't want them to use, or they can use
What?
recycling. I mean, it's just like,
So I've got a store, for example, that won't accept glass bottles. Love to put something in glass bottles, they don't want it, even though that is probably something more effective to use. The plastics offer a more desirable marketing tool for us to get product to market, and the carton is not distinguishable from Jack and Jill on the shelf. So
so they're going
having-
to use the
having
plastic
some-
that's recyclable. Just like
Well,
I
that's-
choose
I
to
use
use
that
a
currently.
recyclable versus a styrofoam.
Folks are
That's a
using that
choice.
currently.
Right.
Which is the example that Mr. Ward brought up with the water bottles and some milk jugs and et cetera, et cetera. But the legislation is specifically looking to eliminate 75% of this, as I believe I understand correctly, 75% reduction of this by 2024.
What what you were talking about producing milk in a recyclable jug, they're not talking about reducing that.
No.
What they're talking about is when...
5,
oh,
6, 7,
yeah,
all the stuff
right.
that's not recyclable. There's options out there. They're just trying to shift them. I have the option of buying
But it's-
styrofoam or
It's a
recyclable
definition,
containers.
Supervisor. So it's a single-use plastic. So they're describing a single-use plastic and a 75% reduction of that single-use plastic by 2024. Find me the
Recyclable.
definition of that.
Like a straw. A straw is a single-use plastic. You use it once, there is no mechanism for recycling that
So-
straw, there's no collection program for
So I
recycling
may
the
be
straw.
confused, is what you're pointing out. However,
Or
trying
I'm
to-
seeing it differently. I think you and I are totally seeing it
I think
differently.
that, and having kind of done a cursory read through the legislation, I think that there needs to be some more clarity on this piece, and something that Mr. Howard just brought up that I want to make sure I have clarity, since I'm the one that asked for this to be on the agenda. And I do believe that there is a need to address this. I really do. And I don't think it's
wouldn't disagree with
the
you.
long-term philosophical change in how California's run. I think that is,
Yeah.
that I don't disagree with that. I just don't think that addresses the problem now. What I don't know, and which was just brought up, is does this include 75% reduction in all single use? In other words, would someone who is currently using a single-use plastic that is recyclable, do they also have to reduce 75%? And I can't answer that question definitively. I think we need to make sure that
don't know.
we've done
Can we seek
good
clarity on that?
research
That's-
before we even suggest a support letter.
I'd be happy to bring this back to the
If-
next meeting and have further discussion on it.
If Mr. Howard is,
I'd table my motion at this point.
Okay,
Yeah, my understanding
I'm good with
is
that.
You do.
okay.
I'm good
Any
with that.
public comment? All right, I think it's a good debate. I think it's one that we need to have. Something Mr. Greenhouse said that I think is really important is that we have a responsibility, I believe, to educate and encourage the people that we serve to be responsible. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with us advocating to our constituents that it's a responsible thing to do business with businesses that are trying to be responsible themselves. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if all of us collectively were willing to simply say, listen, at your establishment, we'd like you to stop using these products because we don't think they're good for our community, then we can affect change with our voice in our community as well. And I think that those are.
Because of the 7-year-old girl who sent us a letter.
So I
And I
think that
switched
that's a very
everything
good point,
over.
that we need to encourage our community to
Right?
speak
My
up
husband
for
has
those
a
things.
really weak
So-
heart.
I
You
would
just
love
saw
to
that
see that
face.
letter, because that sounds like a green ribbon award.
Because in the end,
So-
it's about choices.
It is.
Yeah.
It's about personal
Yeah,
choices.
so, and one more, since I was the one who brought it up, I'd like to go back to advertising again. Now, we've legislated, we've regulated advertisers around cigarettes. We've regulated advertisers around alcohol. Maybe we need to regulate advertisers around plastics. I don't know, just a thought.
Okay, one of the, given the robust conversation that we've had under 7.4, I'm going to guess that 7.5 is going to be an even deeper discussion when it comes to guiding principles for legislative advocacy. And I might suggest to the board that as we work through something like SB 54 and AB 1080, that can be a sort of a test on whether or not we are interested in establishing a legislative priority platform. But Mr. Ward, I know you wanted to put this on, and I certainly don't want to undermine your thoughts on that.
My preference to make sure that I'm expressing the interests of the board, which is the political entity to express itself, that's the reason for this. Our preference is always to have a letter that you review and approve before we send. The reality of the legislative process, though, is oftentimes these bills live or die depending upon whether or not they get out of a committee. And sometimes there can be several committee meetings between board meetings. And so our advocacy on your behalf is going to be most effective if we are nimble and available to respond to the committee that is hearing a bill. And so that's the purpose of having these guided principles for legislative advocacy, is to enable those things that are already decided, that are not contentious among the members of the board, that you already agree on. Then we at least have the ability to potentially send a letter and to have it ratified after the fact. But then at least we could have the potential to be part of the conversation. By not having this, we can't be part of the conversation when there's bills moving rapidly through a committee, because we don't have a board meeting necessarily before the next committee hearing. So that it is an effort to try to make the voice of this board more effective. It is not in any way an effort to undermine this board's effectiveness. It's to augment that effectiveness.
Mr. Trout.
I advocated for this last go around. I think we absolutely have to have policies in place that allow you to react accordingly. I've read through this. I didn't see anything here that rose to a level of concern based on what we've discussed previously, at least this current board. So I'd make the motion to approve at least these guiding principles for legislative advocacy.
And I'll second that.
A motion
I'd
and a
like,
second.
I'd like to add an amendment to this.
Okay.
I'd like us to also look into where we can encourage the removal of regulations that hamper the creation of new technologies focused on the breakdown of solid waste, i.e. closed system incineration, trash to energy, new technology.
I don't think that there would be any dispute from this commission that anything that came from that vantage point would be something
No.
that we would all support.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Good recommendation.
So, getting somebody
I would
to
amend
sponsor
my-
that legislation in Sacramento may be more challenging, but if it comes, we'd like to be the first person to say, we're all for that.
If
Absolutely.
Director Ward understands Commissioner Greenhouse's discussion
Amendment.
piece, I'd amend my motion to include that amendment to those policies.
Commissioner Greenough, can you reiterate, please?
Encourage removal of regulation that may hamper the creation of new technologies that focus on the breakdown of solid waste, i.e. closed system incineration or trash to energy or other new technologies that may arise.
And if there's language around this, Mr. Ward, that would help, fill out that as you've done here.
Feel free to wordsmith
Yeah.
that.
Okay, thank you for that.
So we'll have 10 pieces here of our platform. Yes.
Okay, because I'm good with this, Mr. Greeno. I didn't hear the word recyclable in there, and so you're just kind of going with all
Waste.
All
whether
waste,
it's
period.
Whether
Okay.
it's paper, whether it's plastic, it can all be broken down.
Okay. All right.
Okay, very good. Any public comment? All right, seeing no public comment, then we have a motion and a second, and are you fine with the amendment? to
I
that?
am.
Okay,
Yes, so my
we have-
second will follow the amendment that was
Very
made.
good. Then would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair and score.
Yes, very good. And our final item is thank you letter for the
Move to approve.
Broom Bash.
It's actually
receive
looking
and
to
file?
approve, no, it's approving an authority allocated dumpster to support the 2020 Broom
Oh, I
Bash.
see. Okay, got it.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any public comment? All right, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair and score.
Yes, very good. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.
Good job.